Champions have arrived here believing they owned it, and it has buried every single one of them by the second sector. This is the Hungaroring. For 36 years, it has been the quiet equalizer of this sport, the track where horsepower goes to die and patience goes to war. Every July, the fastest car on paper walks through its gates, and every July, the track decides whether that means anything at all. This year, two teams arrive with two different stories. One has won 10 poles in a row and believes it cannot be stopped. The other has spent an entire season losing time on every straight this circuit doesn't have. And that is exactly why, this weekend, the Hungaroring might be the only place on Earth where Ferrari can finally even the score. Most people will only find out what happened here after the checkered flag falls, once the headlines have already written the story for them. But if you're the kind of fan who wants to understand why a race is decided before a single lap is driven, you're already ahead of that curve. And every one of you who sticks around for moments like this is quietly helping a small channel become the place people come first, not last, for the real story behind the story. Start with the raw numbers, because on their own they tell you exactly why this season has felt like a foregone conclusion for months. Mercedes have taken 10 consecutive pole positions. Every single qualifying session of the year has ended with a silver car on top, from the opening rounds through the height of summer. Kimi Antonelli leads the Drivers' Championship with 6 wins and 204 points, a margin built lap by lap, straight by straight, on a car that simply refuses to be caught once the road opens up. This is a title Mercedes have not won since 2021, and after years of chasing shadows on Sunday afternoons, it suddenly looks close enough to touch again. But strip away the trophies and the points table, and what you're left with is a championship built almost entirely on straight-line strength. A single, specific advantage repeated race after race after race, on circuit after circuit that happens to reward exactly that quality. Every dynasty looks unbreakable right up until the track stops asking the question it's been winning. And that's the mystery worth sitting with for a moment before this weekend even begins. What changes this time that hasn't changed all year? 10 consecutive poles isn't just a stat line. It's a pattern, and patterns invite questions. Every track so far this season has, in one way or another, rewarded a car that pulls away on the straights and defends comfortably into the braking zones. Budapest doesn't work that way, and it never has. That single structural difference is the reason this particular weekend has been circled on calendars inside Maranello for months, long before anyone in the wider paddock started paying attention to it. The answer starts with a number almost nobody outside the paddock ever talks about: power sensitivity. It sounds technical, but the idea is simple enough to hold in one sentence. It measures how much lap time a car gains or loses for every extra unit of engine power at a given circuit. Some tracks reward it brutally. Baku, with its mile-long straight hurtling into Turn 1, punishes anything short of a monster engine. Montreal, with its stop-start rhythm of hairpins spitting cars straight back onto acceleration zones, does much the same. And then there's the Hungaroring, one of the least power-sensitive circuits on the entire calendar, second only to Monaco in low average speed, a place where raw horsepower simply doesn't get the chance to matter the way it does everywhere else. Which brings us to the number that should genuinely worry Mercedes heading into this weekend. The FIA found Ferrari's power unit to be over 4% down on the benchmark this season, a deficit that has quietly shaped every straight-line battle since the opening race in March, bleeding away tenths on every long straight from Bahrain to Spa. But on a lap where drivers are at full throttle barely half the time, that deficit doesn't just shrink. It nearly disappears entirely. For one weekend a year, Ferrari's biggest scar becomes invisible, hidden not by an upgrade, not by a redesign, but simply by the geography of the track itself. Picture the layout, and you start to understand exactly why. 14 corners packed into a tight, twisting ribbon of asphalt, with almost no room to breathe, and just 2 short DRS zones to offer any relief from the constant direction changes. This is Monaco without the walls, a circuit where overtaking has become nearly extinct, and where that scarcity flips the entire risk equation on its head. On every other track on the calendar, a disappointing Saturday can still be rescued by a strong, aggressive Sunday. Here, qualifying is the race. The grid slot you take on Saturday afternoon is, in almost every meaningful sense, the result you carry into Sunday evening. If Ferrari can't convert its pace into a genuine front-row start, none of the analysis in this video will matter at all. Then there's the heat to reckon with. Late July temperatures in Budapest are notoriously punishing on rear tires, and as a race wears into its closing stint, traction stops being a footnote and becomes the difference between holding a position and quietly watching it slip away under braking. This is where the SF-26's quiet strength all season finally gets a stage built for it. While rivals have slid, struggled, and faded in the closing laps of races throughout this year, Ferrari has spent the whole season proving it can hold pace precisely when others begin to unravel, a trait that means far more in Budapest's late summer heat than it ever has anywhere else. To understand why this weekend carries so much weight, you have to understand the car itself, split honestly into two halves. On one side, elite cornering speed and genuine aerodynamic grip, the kind of numbers that make engineers quietly optimistic whenever a circuit like this one appears on the calendar. This is the half of the SF-26 that rarely makes headlines, because it doesn't show up on a speed trap or a straight-line comparison graphic. It shows up in the middle sector, through the kind of direction changes that dominate a lap of the Hungaroring, where a car that rotates cleanly and holds grip through long, committed corners can quietly bank tenths that never appear on any highlight reel. On the other side sits a straight-line deficit the team has never once tried to hide from view. It has been acknowledged from within the team that the engine remains the car's defining weakness, a fact that everyone inside Maranello has had to build an entire season strategy around, race after race, compromise after compromise, wing choice after wing choice. But there's a second gap sitting underneath that first one, less obvious to the casual eye, and just as costly over a season. Mercedes' superior energy deployment and recovery under braking, an advantage that compounds every single time a straight opens up ahead of them. It's the kind of edge that barely shows up in a single lap time, but adds up brutally over a full Grand Prix distance, lap after lap, stop after stop. And here's the turn of the knife. None of that deployment advantage matters on a track with almost nowhere to unload it. If you want proof that this isn't wishful thinking dressed up as analysis, look no further than Silverstone. Charles Leclerc's win there was his first of the season, ending a drought stretching all the way back to 2024, and it arrived on a fast, flowing circuit that, on paper, should have punished Ferrari in exactly the same way it had all year long. Instead, Leclerc made a lightning start, held his nerve through a chaotic afternoon of penalties and safety cars, and crossed the line as a winner on a weekend nobody inside the team had circled as a likely victory. Then came the twist nobody quite saw coming. Lewis Hamilton finished third, handing Ferrari an unexpected double podium on a weekend the team wasn't supposed to win at all, let alone dominate the way it briefly threatened to. And buried inside that same result was a genuine crack in Mercedes' armor. Antonelli started on pole and left with nothing, undone by a mechanical failure and a penalty that dropped him out of the points entirely on his own team's supposedly untouchable weekend. It was the kind of afternoon that doesn't show up in a preseason simulation, a reminder that even the most dominant power unit on the grid still has to survive an entire race distance intact. The fastest team on paper is not invincible. It has already broken once this year, in full view of everyone watching. Then came Spa, the ultimate power circuit, full throttle climbs stacked one after another up the Kimmel Straight and beyond, exactly the kind of conditions that should bury a weak engine without a shred of mercy. Antonelli took pole and the win, Mercedes' 10th straight of the season, but Leclerc finished under 2 seconds behind, having led for a stretch of the race on the one track built specifically to expose every weakness Ferrari carries into a weekend. Buried inside that result is a tactical detail worth remembering long after the headlines fade. Ferrari ran a low-drag rear-wing package built specifically to survive tracks like this one, sacrificing downforce just to keep itself in the fight on a circuit that should have offered no fight at all, which makes the turn toward Hungary even sharper by comparison. This weekend asks for the exact opposite wing setup, maximum downforce, the SF-26's natural home turf. If Ferrari could fight that close while deliberately suppressing its own strengths just to survive Spa, what happens the moment it finally doesn't have to compromise at all? And then there's the ghost that hangs over this entire race weekend before a single lap has even been driven. Budapest's own history with Lewis Hamilton. 8 wins at this circuit, the most any driver has ever taken at a single Grand Prix, a figure that stands alone in the sports record books. Add to that 9 pole positions, a mark nobody else in Formula One is remotely close to touching. It traces back to a young champion's rookie McLaren years, through the dominant Mercedes seasons that followed one after another, all the way to a record-equaling 8th win in 2020. And here's the detail that lands hardest of all. This is also the track where Hamilton took his last pole position, all the way back in 2023. Meaning the exact circuit where Ferrari suddenly has a car worth qualifying with is the very same circuit where its own driver has been nearly unbeatable for over a decade. But don't get carried away by the fairy tale just yet. Hamilton left Spa in 4th place, and he's been open about needing to find something more before this weekend is finished. Even inside the team itself, there's no appetite for overconfidence. Charles Leclerc has refused to call Ferrari the favorite heading into Budapest, pointing straight back to Monaco, another slow, technical circuit where Ferrari looked perfect on paper and still underperformed when it actually mattered on track. Team principal Fred Vasseur was asked directly what to expect from his team this weekend. His answer came in one word: nothing. There's a genuine technical reason behind that caution, too, beyond simple superstition. Modern downforce levels mean the Hungaroring isn't the pure mechanical grip track it was 20 years ago. Faster corners now carry more weight in the overall lap than they used to, and that quietly narrows the theoretical edge Ferrari is counting on this weekend, whether the numbers on paper admit it or not. And then there's the team almost nobody's talking about heading into Budapest. McLaren arrive with a new floor and fresh aerodynamic parts, fresh off back-to-back 1-2 finishes at this exact circuit in 2024 and 2025. A run of dominance on this specific piece of asphalt that neither Ferrari nor Mercedes can currently claim. Twice in a row, the predominantly medium-speed nature of this track has suited their car perfectly, and twice in a row they have walked away with maximum points while the two bigger storylines of the moment fought over the scraps behind them, which forces a complete reframe of the entire weekend before a single practice session has even run. This might not be a two-team fight at all. Ferrari may have to beat McLaren just to reach Mercedes, let alone challenge for the win outright. The story everyone is watching, Ferrari versus Mercedes, might not even be the real race unfolding once lights go out on Sunday. A fresh floor and new aero parts arriving at exactly the track where this team has already proven it belongs is not the kind of detail a title-chasing rival can afford to overlook, even while all the attention sits elsewhere. Underneath all of it sits a ticking clock that makes this particular weekend uniquely urgent. Ferrari's next power unit upgrade, a redesigned turbocharger, is coming, but not until after the summer break, expected to arrive at Zandvoort or Monza, which makes Hungary a closing window in the truest possible sense. The one race on the entire calendar where the track itself hands Ferrari the power it doesn't have yet, for free, simply by not requiring it in the first place. After this weekend passes, Ferrari gets faster on its own merits, which means this specific chance to beat Mercedes without the upgrade may never come again in quite this form, on quite these terms. Which brings everything back to Saturday, because on this track, Saturday decides everything that follows. One lap, no margin for error, track position locking in the entire outcome of the race before Sunday even begins in earnest. There's a detail worth holding on to here, too. The long flat-out run from the grid down to turn 1 is one of the best overtaking windows on the entire lap, and Ferrari starts have been a quiet strength all season long, often making up positions in the very seconds most fans have barely settled into their seats. But it cuts both ways, and it always has. If Mercedes take an 11th straight pole, the very same track that could have protected Ferrari instead traps them helplessly behind for 70 laps, with nowhere to go and no way through. Everything this weekend has built toward compresses down into a single Saturday afternoon in Budapest. This is not a championship-deciding race, not with so much of the season still ahead and so many points still on the table. But it may be the moment that decides who walks into the summer break still believing they're the team to beat, and who spends 6 weeks quietly wondering what went wrong on a weekend that had looked, on paper, entirely winnable. Every detail this video has laid out, the power sensitivity numbers, the tire management, the low-drag compromises at Spa, the ticking clock on the turbocharger upgrade, all of it funnels down into the same 70 laps around the same tight, unforgiving ribbon of asphalt outside Budapest. There's a human story sitting underneath the technical one too. A young leader in Antonelli carrying pressure most drivers twice his age have never had to face at 19 years old, defending a championship lead built on machinery rather than mistakes, and a veteran in Hamilton searching for the version of himself this exact track has always managed to bring out, year after year, decade after decade, going all the way back to a rookie season that feels like a different era of the sport. Entirely. Two very different kinds of pressure, arriving at the same circuit on the same weekend, for very different reasons. For one weekend, before the upgrades arrive and before the straights come back to even the score in Mercedes' favor once again, the Hungaroring doesn't care who's dominant. It only cares who can corner. If you've made it this far, you're already part of the small group helping this channel build towards something bigger, and subscribing is how you get to see how this season, and this channel's own journey, actually finishes.